The Bible plainly says there was a global flood a few thousand years ago. But critics have argued that the implications of a global flood prove that it couldn't have actually happened. For example, Bill Nye the Science Guy, in a debate, argued that there are around 16 million different species on the planet today. And if the flood was only 4,000 years ago, and if the ark had, say, 7,000 different species on it, they would have to turn into the 16 million species we have today in a pretty short period of time. Doing the math, that would mean that 11 new species have popped into existence every day over the last 4,000 years since the flood. Crazy. First, those who make this argument are at least correct in one respect. The biblical flood model doesn't argue that all modern species were on the ark. In Genesis 6:20, the Bible uses the word kind to describe the types of creatures that were brought onto the ark, not the modern word species. The word kind is thought to be closer to family or genus in biology. So on the ark, there would have been representatives of, for example, the dog kind that had the genetic capability to produce all species within that kind. Coyotes, foxes, wolves, domestic poodles, wiener dogs. Creationists call this kind of change microevolution. The ancestral animal already had the genetic variation built into it to make all these different species possible. Nothing new was really made. That is very different than the standard evolutionary model that claims a simple, single-celled organism could evolve into jellyfish and pineapples and elm trees and people over millions of years. So someone who believes what the Bible says about the worldwide flood must be able to explain how the few animal varieties on the ark, however many there were, could have given rise to the millions of species on the planet today. First, are there really 16 million species on the planet today? Some studies have the number as low as 2 to 3 million. The Public Library of Science Biology estimated the number of species on the planet at less than 11 million, not 16. The number of living species on Earth that we've actually counted at the time of the study was less than 1.5 million. 11 million is a projection, an educated guess. But even ignoring that, the 11 million projection includes fish and whales and sponges, every marine creature. And if you know anything about fish, they'd be more worried about the boat than the flood. They didn't have to be on the ark. That brings the estimate down to around 8.75 million species in existence today that came from the creatures on the ark. We could remove many more creatures from that number as well, since it also includes many other creatures that can survive in water, like amphibians or other freshwater creatures. We'll just leave them in for the sake of argument, though. Well, what about plants? The Bible doesn't mention Noah carrying samples of the various plant species onto the ark, since they are not flesh, Genesis 6:19. So, except for the plants that the animals and Noah and his family ate, we can remove those from the list, bringing the count down to 8.4 million. But critics claim that the plants on Earth would have died in the flood, and some would have. But it's also true that Noah could have brought seeds onto the ark, and most of the world's vegetation lives underwater. Scientists estimate that up to 85% of Earth's oxygen comes from ocean plants. Not to mention, many dead plants, with their seeds intact, would have been floating in piles on the surface of the floodwaters, that later could have regerminated on the land after the floodwaters subsided. Studies show that seeds can survive submersion in saltwater for extended periods of time, and ironically, Darwin himself verified several ways in which seeds can survive and be viable after extended travel in saltwater. Something else we need to take into account with this argument is something called synonymous species. Animals that were originally thought to be two distinct species and given two different names, but now are understood to be the same. It isn't uncommon for multiple scientists to discover and name an already existing species simply due to lack of research. This is a known weakness in estimating species. This paper says, a survey of 2,938 taxonomists with expertise across all major domains of life revealed that synonyms are a major problem at the species level. They said that as much as 46.6% of all species could be duplicates. The World Register of Marine Species documents that 44.5% of all accepted marine species are synonyms. But just for the sake of argument, let's take the smallest average amount given by the study, that only 17.9% of the remaining species are indeed synonyms. That would reduce our 8.4 million species count down to 6.8 million species on the Earth today. Obviously, such an estimate is a far cry from Bill Nye's estimated 16 million. Also, if the flood was 4,500 years ago, which is closer to our estimate of the biblical timeline, though some push the flood back even further, that would change the total from 11 new species per day down to 4. If there really are fewer species on the planet today than the researchers estimate, which is possible, and if there was more time since the flood, which is also possible, and if there are more synonyms, which is likely, and if there are more species that could survive outside the ark, which is virtually certain, and, something we haven't talked about yet, if there were more representative kinds on the ark, this number decreases even further. If you consider the fact that most insects, as well as other invertebrates, which make up at least 95% of the planet's animal species, wouldn't have needed to be included on the ark, since they don't fall under the categories included in Genesis 7. They could survive outside the ark and therefore could be removed from the list, along with fungi, protozoa, and bacteria species, decreasing the number by as much as 4.5 million. So, when skeptics argue that the Bible requires the emergence of 16 million new species in just 4,000 years since the flood, it's a very misleading argument because more kinds of animals may have been represented on the ark. More time could have passed between the flood and today, and the 16 million species number is likely heavily exaggerated. In reality, around 1/5 to 1/2 of all species are synonyms, one animal with multiple names. There are likely far fewer than 5 million species on Earth, and that's even including animals that live in the water, as well as plants, fungi, protozoa, chromista, archaea, bacteria, and many other things that could survive outside the ark, like various insects and invertebrates. But it's also not far-fetched to think that there could have been multiple new sorts of creatures bred around the world after the flood. People have been able to breed thousands of new types of dogs, cats, plants, and more. Scientists are still consistently documenting 15,000 new species each year that we had not noticed before, an average of 41 new species observed by humans every day. Ironically, exactly what Bill Nye said should be the case if the biblical flood actually happened. So much for the atheist argument that this disproves the biblical worldwide flood. If you'd like to dive deeper into the references, check out the full article at apologeticspress.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the Gospel Broadcasting Network. Thanks for watching.